The first day at Lincoln High felt like walking into a storm for 16-year-old Emily Carson. She had just moved to town with her father, a quiet mechanic who'd lost his job months earlier. Emily was shy, soft-spoken, and wore second-hand clothes that didn't quite fit. While most students chatted in groups or scrolled on their phones, she sat alone at the corner table during lunch, eating a small sandwich she'd packed herself. Her eyes darted around nervously, hoping someone, anyone, would smile her way. But instead, a group of popular kids noticed her. Among them was Chad Benson, the star athlete who thought cruelty made him powerful. "Hey, new girl," he shouted across the cafeteria, his friends laughing. "Nice sweater. Did your grandma knit that?" The laughter echoed as Emily's cheeks flushed red. She looked down, pretending not to hear, wishing she could disappear. But silence never stopped bullies. It invited them closer. From that moment on, she became their target. What they didn't know was that the girl they were about to humiliate had more courage than all of them combined, and someone was watching who wouldn't let it go unanswered. It started small, mocking her clothes, throwing paper at her desk, whispering cruel names when she walked past. Emily bore it quietly, believing things might get better if she stayed out of trouble. But one Friday, everything boiled over. The cafeteria buzzed with laughter as trays clattered and students filled the air with chatter. Emily sat alone again, head low, trying to eat in peace. That's when Chad and his gang walked up. "You think you're too good for us, huh?" sneered Lindsay, one of the girls in the group. Emily didn't respond. Chad smirked and suddenly grabbed her tray, dumping it onto her lap. Gasps filled the room. Before she could stand, two of his friends grabbed her arms and hoisted her onto the lunch table. "Let's give everyone a show." Chad laughed. Students froze, some recording on their phones, too afraid, or too entertained, to stop it. Emily struggled, tears forming as she cried, "Please, let me go." But Chad just grinned and leaned closer, his voice cold. "You don't belong here." At that moment the cafeteria doors swung open, and everything changed. The room fell silent as Mr. Carson, Emily's father, stepped in. He had come to drop off the lunch she'd forgotten at home. The second he saw his daughter pinned to that table, something primal rose within him. The man who'd once been quiet, broken by job loss and hardship, turned into a storm. He crossed the cafeteria in seconds, his boots echoing like thunder. "Get your hands off my daughter," he growled, his voice low but dangerous. Chad froze, his bravado fading. "Sir, it's not what it looks like," he stammered. Mr. Carson's eyes, steel-gray and fierce, cut through him. "You laid hands on her," he said, pulling Emily gently down and standing between her and the bullies. Every student could feel the tension ripple through the room. The principal rushed in, hearing the commotion, but it was too late. The truth was clear. Emily's trembling body, her tears, and the frightened faces of the bullies told the story. Chad tried to speak, but his words stumbled as his friends slowly backed away. That was the moment fear finally flipped, because the bullies realized they weren't the strong ones anymore. Word spread like wildfire. Videos of the incident hit social media that evening, and by morning, everyone in town knew what had happened. Parents called the school demanding justice. Reporters showed up outside, and Chad's perfect reputation began to crumble. Lindsay's tears in the hallway meant nothing now that people saw who she really was. Mr. Carson never raised his hand, but his calm, firm defense of Emily became the talk of the town. The school suspended the bullies indefinitely, and for the first time in her life, Emily walked through the halls without fear. But she didn't celebrate. Instead, she forgave. When reporters asked what she wanted to say to those who hurt her, she simply said, "I just want them to know it's never too late to be kind." Her words struck everyone's hearts. Even Chad's father showed up at their house days later, apologizing on behalf of his son. Emily's father looked at him, tired but gracious. "Teach him to respect others. That's all we ask." And with that, the healing began, not just for Emily but for the entire school. Over time, things shifted at Lincoln High. The cafeteria where Emily once sat alone became a place where students checked on one another. Teachers started anti-bullying programs, and the principal made sure every new student had a mentor. Even Chad, after weeks of suspension and counseling, asked to meet Emily. She hesitated, but her father encouraged her. "Sometimes," he said, "the bravest thing we can do is forgive." When they finally met, Chad's arrogance was gone. His eyes were red with shame. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve that." "None of it." Emily looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You can't undo what you did," she said softly, "but you can choose who you become next." For the first time, Chad smiled, not out of pride but relief. That day marked the beginning of his transformation. And soon, people began to notice how different he was, volunteering at community events, helping younger students, and standing up to others who bullied. Emily had taught him something no punishment could: empathy. Years later, Emily stood on a stage, addressing a crowd of students at her college's graduation. She spoke about that dark day in the cafeteria, the day she thought she was powerless but found her voice through courage and forgiveness. "We all face cruelty at some point," she said, her voice steady. "But what defines us isn't what people do to us. It's how we rise after." Her father sat in the front row, pride shining in his eyes. After her speech, a familiar face approached. It was Chad, now working as a youth counselor. "You changed my life," he said. Emily smiled. "No," she replied, "you changed your own." They shook hands, two people who had once stood on opposite sides of pain but now shared a bond of understanding. As Emily looked out at the crowd, she realized something profound. Kindness isn't weakness, it's power. And sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need compassion the most. The girl who was once thrown on a lunch table had become a symbol of hope, and the bullies who tormented her learned that real strength is not in fear, but in forgiveness.